The rain had finally stopped, but the earth remained a wound that wouldn't heal. Private Klaus Hoffmann sat in the trench, his boots submerged in mud thick as wet concrete, staring at his trembling hands. They were the hands of a 19-year-old boy, though they'd aged decades in the 2 years since he'd left his father's bakery in Munich. The hands that had once shaped dough into golden loaves now struggled to load bullets into a chamber without shaking. The offensive had ended 3 days ago. What remained of his unit, 7 men from an original 40, occupied a section of reclaimed trench that had changed hands so many times. Nobody knew whether it had first been German or French or British. The dead lay everywhere, some already claimed by the mud, others still recognizable as men who'd once had names, mothers, favorite songs. Klaus had learned to avoid looking at their faces. Hoffmann, Sergeant Weber's voice cut through the gray morning. Take Mueller and check the forward position. See if those British bastards left us any supplies. Klaus nodded, too tired to speak. He climbed from the trench with Friedrich Mueller, a farm boy from Bavaria who still somehow found things to smile about, though his eyes had grown hollow as graves. They moved through the devastated landscape in silence. Craters filled with rainwater reflected the colorless sky. The remnants of a forest stood like broken teeth on the horizon. Here and there, barbed wire caught scraps of uniform, shreds of humanity. The British trench was worse than their own. An artillery shell had collapsed one entire section, burying whoever had been inside. The smell was overwhelming, cordite, rot, and something sweet that Klaus had learned was the scent of death itself. Skice? Mueller whispered, covering his nose with his sleeve. They moved carefully, checking dugouts for anything useful. Food, ammunition, medicine. The army had promised supplies that never came. Klaus had eaten nothing but watery soup and stale bread for 5 days. In the third dugout they found him. The British soldier sat propped against the earthen wall, his head tilted as if sleeping. But the dark stain across his chest told a different story. He'd been young, maybe Klaus's age, maybe younger. Sandy hair fell across his forehead. His eyes were closed, which was a mercy. Poor bastard, Mueller said softly. Klaus should have kept moving, should have followed protocol and searched the body quickly, efficiently, the way they'd been trained. But something made him pause. The soldier's hand rested on a small leather-bound book, fingers still curled protectively around it, even in death. A diary. Klaus's training screamed at him to look for intelligence, maps, orders. But his hand moved of its own accord, gently prying the book from the dead man's grip. The leather was worn soft, stained with mud and something darker. He opened it. September 12th, 1916. Mother insists I write, though I haven't the faintest idea what to say. I suppose I should start with this. My name is Thomas Edward Whitmore. I'm 17 years old, and in 3 days, I'll be on a ship to France. Father says it's our duty. Margaret cried when I told her, but she gave me this diary and made me promise to fill every page and come home safe. Asterisk. Asterisk, I promised. God help me, I promised. Asterisk. Klaus's breath caught. The words were in English, but he'd learned enough from captured letters and documents to read them. More than that, he understood them in a way that transcended translation. Find anything? Mueller called from outside. Nothing useful, Klaus heard himself say. He slipped the diary into his coat, feeling the weight of it settle against his chest like a second heartbeat. That night, while the others slept, Klaus read by candlelight. October 1916. Asterisk, the noise never stops. Even when the guns are silent, there's ringing in my ears, like church bells stuck on a single note. Johnny Henderson from my unit says it'll pass, but his hands shake when he lights his cigarettes, so I don't believe him. Asterisk. Asterisk, I killed a man today. At least I think I did. We went over the top at dawn. Everything became smoke and screaming. I fired my rifle into the gray and saw someone fall. Was it my bullet? Does it matter? Asterisk. Asterisk, Margaret would be ashamed of me. Mother would weep. Father would tell me it was my duty, but his voice would be hollow. Asterisk. I want to go home. Klaus closed his eyes. He'd written almost the same words in his last letter to his mother, the one he'd burned instead of sending. December 1916. Christmas in the trenches. Someone started singing Silent Night, and for a moment, just a moment, I heard German voices join in from across no man's land. We're all so young, all so far from home. Why are we here? Who decided that this mud, this blood, this endless dying was necessary? Lieutenant Morrison shot a man who tried to stand up and wave. Said it was treason to fraternize with the enemy. But I saw the German soldier's face before he fell. He was smiling. He thought maybe there could be peace. Just for one night. There can't be. The pages blurred. Klaus wiped his eyes roughly, angry at himself for the weakness. March 1917. Lieutenant Morrison is dead. Sniper got him while he was inspecting the line. I should feel something, grief, maybe, or satisfaction that the man who killed that German boy is gone. I feel nothing. I'm becoming nothing. Margaret writes that she's engaged. William Fisher, the banker's son. He has flat feet, so he won't serve. She says she's sorry, but she can't wait forever. She can't wait for a ghost. I don't blame her. I'm already dead. My body just hasn't figured it out yet. Klaus read through the night, through page after page of Thomas Whitmore's disintegration. The bright-eyed boy who'd promised his mother he'd come home safe became a hollow thing that merely survived, day after day, in the machinery of slaughter. June 1918. Henry died today. Gas got him. He died choking, drowning in air, clawing at his throat. I held his hand. What else could I do? We used to talk about after. He wanted to be a teacher. I was going to work with my father in his shop. We made plans like men who had futures. Now he's wrapped in canvas, and I'm writing about him in past tense, and tomorrow there will be another Henry, another set of plans that will never happen. I don't remember what hope feels like. The final entries were brief, almost fragmented. October 1918. They say the war might end. I don't believe it. The war can't end. We're all too deep in it. It's in our lungs, our blood. When this is over, if it's ever over, we'll carry it inside us like shrapnel. November 1918. Rumors of armistice. The officers seem nervous, excited. The men are too tired to care. If I make it home, will Margaret even recognize me? Will I recognize myself? The last entry was dated 3 days ago, November 8th, 1918. They say it's almost over. Maybe days, maybe hours. Of all the ironies, to die now, when peace is so close you can almost taste it. To have survived this long, through everything, only to fall in the final moments. If anyone finds this, tell my mother I tried to keep my promise. Tell Margaret I understand. Tell my father. The sentence ended there. Thomas Whitmore had run out of time before he could finish his thought. The weeks that followed were strange and hollow. The armistice came on November 11th at the 11th hour, and the guns finally fell silent. The sudden absence of artillery was worse than the noise had been. In the silence, Klaus heard ghosts. They were sent home in groups, processed through camps and stations like cattle. Klaus clutched the diary through it all, hidden in his coat. He should have left it, should have buried it with Thomas Whitmore's body, or thrown it into the mud to rot with everything else the war had destroyed. But he couldn't. On the train back to Munich, he sat wedged between other soldiers, none of them speaking. They were boys who'd become old men, who'd seen things that couldn't be unseen. Some stared out windows at the passing landscape, looking for home in the ruins. Others slept or pretended to. Klaus opened the diary again, to a passage, April 1917. I wonder about the German soldiers. Do they have mothers who wait for letters? Sisters who pray for them? Do they lie in their trenches and wonder why we're killing each other over mud and wire? We're told they're monsters. But I heard one crying last night, across no man's land. He was calling for his mother. His voice sounded like mine. Asterisk. When Klaus finally reached Munich, the city was unrecognizable. Not from physical damage, it had been spared the worst of the war's destruction, but from some internal collapse. People moved through streets like shadows. Victory had been promised. Defeat had been delivered. The empire had crumbled. The Kaiser had fled. Everything they'd been told to die for had turned to ash. His father's bakery was still standing. Klaus paused outside, looking through the window at the man inside. Heinrich Hoffmann had aged 20 years. His hair was white, his shoulders stooped. He was measuring flour with the precision of long practice, but his movements were mechanical, joyless. Klaus pushed open the door. The bell chimed, the same clear note he remembered from childhood. His father looked up. For a moment there was no recognition. Then Heinrich's face crumpled. "Klaus! I'm home, Papa." They embraced in the middle of the shop, among the half-empty shelves and the smell of bread that reminded Klaus of everything he'd been fighting to return to. His father sobbed against his shoulder. Deep, wrenching sounds that shook them both. "We thought. They said your unit. We hadn't heard." "I know, Papa. I know." That night, Klaus sat in his childhood bedroom, surrounded by relics of the boy he'd been. Books about adventure, a wooden sword he'd played with, a photograph of himself at 16, grinning stupidly with no idea what was coming. Number 14 was a modest house with a small garden. Roses climbed the fence, red ones, full of autumn blooms. Klaus stood outside for 10 minutes trying to find courage. Finally, he knocked. The woman who answered was in her 50s, with sandy hair threaded with gray and eyes the same shade of blue as Thomas's. She looked at Klaus with polite confusion. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Klaus's voice cracked on the name. "Yes. My name is Klaus Hoffmann. I was..." He couldn't find the words in English, couldn't explain. Instead, he pulled the diary from his coat and held it out with shaking hands. Mrs. Whitmore stared at it. Her face went pale. "Thomas's diary. They said they told us he was killed, but they never sent his things. We never..." Her voice broke. "How do you have this?" "I found him," Klaus whispered, "in France, after the battle. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She took the diary with trembling hands, opening it to see her son's handwriting again after 5 years. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "You were there? When he..." "After. He was already gone. But he..." Klaus swallowed hard. "He wasn't alone for long. I want you to know that." Mrs. Whitmore looked up at him, really seeing him for the first time. "You're German." "Yes." "You fought against my son." "Yes." There was no point in lying, no comfort in evasion. She studied his face, young, haunted, carrying its own weight of loss. "Come inside," she finally said. "Please." They sat in her parlor, drinking tea that Klaus could barely taste. Mrs. Whitmore read passages from the diary, crying quietly, occasionally laughing at some memory the words triggered. Klaus told her about finding Thomas, about reading his words in the trenches, about how the diary had kept him human when everything else was trying to turn him into a weapon. "He wrote about Margaret," Mrs. Whitmore said softly. "She married William. They have 2 children now. She still cries sometimes, when she thinks no one is watching." "He understood," Klaus said. "He didn't blame her. And Henry..." She touched a passage. "Henry Morrison. His mother lives 3 streets over. They're still waiting for his body to be identified." They talked until evening fell, sharing grief across the chasm of former enemies. Mrs. Whitmore showed Klaus photographs. Thomas as a baby, as a boy, on his last day before shipping out, serious in his uniform but still recognizable as someone's son. As Klaus prepared to leave, Mrs. Whitmore took his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Thank you for bringing him back to me," she said. "Not his body, I know that's gone. But this..." She held up the diary. "This is him. His voice, his heart. You gave me my son again." Klaus's composure finally broke. He wept in the stranger's parlor, in the home of his enemy, mourning for Thomas Whitmore and Friedrich Muller and every boy who'd been ground to nothing in the mud of France. Mrs. Whitmore held him while he cried. This German soldier who'd killed and survived. And when his sobs finally quieted, she said something he would carry for the rest of his life. He would have liked you, I think. In another world, in another time, you boys would have been friends. Klaus returned to Munich carrying something lighter than what he'd brought. The diary stayed with Mrs. Whitmore. It belonged to her, to Thomas's memory. But Klaus carried the words in his heart. He never spoke of the war to his children or his grandchildren. He couldn't explain the mud, the gas, the endless days of dying. But he lived deliberately, fully, wringing joy from every moment. He baked bread with his father and later took over the shop. He married Anna, a teacher with kind eyes. They had 3 children who never heard artillery.